You guys got it done, folks. Power to the people. Greg Schiano. What is old is what's new. Head football coach, Rutgers University. I mean, guys, I got to tell you, this has been, I just don't know where to begin. This has been like, I liken it to binge watching a really good show on Netflix, because when it's over, you're like, oh my God, that was awesome. And then you keep thinking back like, oh, I completely forgot that happened. I mean, there's so much stuff happened in the past week to get this thing done, to bring Greg Schiano back as Rutgers coach. I mean, it's just remarkable, everything that transpired over Thanksgiving weekend. Deal is dead on Sunday. It's alive the next Sunday. I am literally still trying to process it all. I didn't think this fan base had it in them to have this reaction. It is, of course, absolutely typical that it became a political thing in New Jersey because, hey, it's New Jersey. Someone said to me this. Someone said this would make a great documentary. And when people say that, I usually laugh like, yeah, sure, right, whatever. But I'm not so sure they're wrong that this might be, a pretty good, 30 for 30 someday. Sarge, I just, I'm going to throw it open. I mean, what to you is the thing that sticks out over the past week that still makes you scratch your head?
The fact that we can all take a nice long vacation now that it's over.
With that, yeah.
Listen, I mean, I talked to probably about 7 people yesterday who have been sweating it out, people on both sides of it. And it's just relief. I mean, because this was, and we talked about this early on, this was the one guy who checked off all the boxes. He made the most sense. Everyone understands that this rebuilding job is as difficult as it was back in 2000 when Greg Schiano first inherited it. Who else can? I mean, there are other coaches of quality out there for sure, but who else is the one guy who has done it before, the only guy to do it before? He's available. By all accounts, he wanted the job. It just made perfect sense.
It made perfect sense, and yet it almost didn't happen, Cratch. And I guess that I come back to that a lot, just how close do you think we were to this thing imploding? And when you look back at it now, are you surprised we're sitting here today that this thing got done?
I always felt at the beginning when they fired Ash that Greg was going to be the coach. I just didn't know how it was all going to unfurl. I just always thought in the back of my head that odds were better than not that Greg was going to be the coach. But I'll be honest with you, I thought it was dead because, and where it really started to change, in my opinion, was Tuesday night at the Rack. Because one, the lack of outcry from the fan base, like everyone talked a big game on the message boards and on Twitter, and then there were like 3 signs at the Rack, late arriving protests that night, and I thought, okay, like Rutgers may have weathered the storm basically. I thought Sunday was rough, Monday was rough, but I was like, hey, maybe they've out everyone, that pro Schiano crowd's kind of punched itself out, and now they're going to be okay. But that night, I talked to a couple of donors, and they were saying, I heard Greg, he'll reconsider. Greg's come back to the table, and like you didn't know if it was just them like being optimistic or like. Some of these people were high enough that they could have talked to Greg and is Greg kind of telling them what they want to hear, trying to let them down? But it turned out that was right. That was the beginning of something in hindsight where there was something brewing, and we broke the story Wednesday that, that there was optimism growing, optimism behind the scenes. They could get back to the table. They got back to the table, and I will tell you that it was when Sarge called me. I think it was like 12:50 in the morning, and I was on Route 1 after we had just dropped off at the office where was our rendezvous point, drive back from Penn State.
You're talking Saturday. You're talking, yeah, okay.
Saturday, yeah. I was just kind of like one, thank God this is over with.
Right. 2,
I mean, it really is. I think sometimes we're so deep in it we can't really it's remarkable.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right.
You're greatest. Kind of stories in college football history that he's coming back to the kingdom he built, at its greatest hour of need after all that's happened. Right. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think your timeline is exactly right too. Tuesday night, I went to bed thinking, forget it. This is over. Woke up Wednesday, and it was just a subtle shift in conversations with people. that they're like, well, I don't know if it's, well, there's a chance he might be willing. And then from there, it took off. I want to talk about the people we think are most responsible for making this happen. And, I asked each one of you to come up with one. I've got my own. When you look at this, Sarge, and you're going through, what happened behind the scenes suddenly to make this a reality, do you have one person who you're like, okay, this is the guy who is maybe, a couple of notches above the rest as far as pulling the strings to get this done?
So if you talk to some Rutgers people who were privy to the negotiations, they will credit, believe it or not, former Governor Chris Christie. And I know it sounds crazy, Steve and James, because we lived it. And on Monday, went right in during the fervor where donors are saying that they're not going to donate anymore. Fans are on the ledge. Chris Christie throws lights a powder keg, by pretty much saying that, Greg Schiano, more than anything, his demands were crazy and he wasn't all in on the job. He just didn't want the job, is what he said.
Right.
And if you so what the point is, there are people inside who are privy to the negotiations who believe that was a catalyst to getting Graciano back to the table.
I love it. There's a little embers there that are still glowing, and here comes our favorite former governor with just a thing of gasoline, and all of a sudden.
Now I know you asked for one person. I'm going to give you two others. Okay, now former governor, current state senator Richard Cody.
Mm-hmm.
He's very close to Graciano. He has made it clear early on. He endorsed him throughout the process. He made no secret that he was talking to Greg and people inside there and people at Rutgers as well. But I think he was the one who kind of really spurred current governor Phil Murphy into getting involved. Now the current governor has really stopped short of saying that he was intimately involved, but he has conceded that he talked with Graciano throughout the process. Just that involvement, I think, really helped push the deal forward. It kept the momentum going. It showed that state lawmakers, while Rutgers is a place that generally does not like political interference, it showed that state lawmakers are on board and that whatever that they want to do going forward with facilities and stuff like that they're going to support. I think Phil Murphy, Richard Cody, and I guess if you want to give Rutgers officials their due, and when they say that Chris Christie served as a catalyst, those three people I think really helped keep the momentum going.
Okay, can you throw in any other governors? Maybe Corzine, give me a little Christy Todd Whitman here.
Brendan Byrne, maybe.
Brendan Byrne just came in at the last minute. Yeah.
Jimmy Greavy actually drove Pat to
It'd be great. I've got a lot of living former governors, don't we? All right, Cratch, who do you got in this scenario? What person do you think made the biggest difference?
I think Eric LeGrand did.
Yeah.
I think that people at Rutgers sense the anger and the emotion in his voice. I mean, shout out to the kids at WRSU who do a great job every day. They didn't, ask Eric to be interviewed. Eric just called in himself that night. I think it was Monday night. I think people, and what he tweeted, and obviously I think his column that ran on the front page of the Star-Ledger on Thursday morning, on Thanksgiving morning, I think was a gut punch for a lot of people.
It was an amazing tone, and I want to just cut you off 1 second, Cratch. Steve Politi deserves a lot of credit. I know he's gonna shy away from this, but he deserves a lot of credit for working with Eric, on that column, and basically, convincing Eric to write it. I agree with you.
It didn't take much convincing.
Either way, the Rutgers fans should know that Steve was pivotal in that column.
Yeah, he was great.
I think Eric is a guy who, no one at Rutgers wants to disappoint Eric. Everyone at Rutgers, is there for Eric at any moment. And I think that the fact that everything about him is so pure and well-intentioned, and the fact that he stood up for Greg like that, I think also Ryan Hart, I think did a tremendous job, in kind of mobilizing the alumni. But I would say Eric, I think Eric, he moved the needle because he's and he is the most prominent former Rutgers football player, even the NFL guys, I think. And he's the guy who people listen and they don't want to disappoint him. And I think he really, no matter what happened, whether they hired Greg or they didn't hire Greg, they could not burn the bridge with Eric LeGrand at Rutgers. And I think that they realized that, and I think they realized how serious and important it was to him. And that made a major impact for a lot of people in power who could make it happen.
There's no question. I believe that absolutely it touched the heartstrings. My choice on this list is Greg Schiano himself. And we talked a lot about what qualities people were looking for in the next coach. And people were like, well, we need an offensive coach. Well, we need a program builder, a head coach. We think you're overlooking just how much it matters for the Rutgers football coach to understand New Jersey. And so when this thing blew up on Sunday, and I think if we hook them up to the lie detector, Greg would say to you, yeah, it was done, but it wasn't done, because he knew enough about how this state works that it's not going to be the athletic director's final say. Certainly, it's not going to be the president of the university's final say. He knew that the mechanism behind the scenes in this state, which politicians were going to have an uproar, what buttons to push. I think he did a lot of that. And I'm not saying he pulled out of the deal knowing this was going to happen. I don't think he possibly could have recognized just how loud the outpouring would be. But once it became clear that people wanted to bring him back to the table, like Senator Cody and a lot of others involved in that, I think he played it to his advantage, because at that point, all right, look, you want me to come back to the table? Well, it's got to get done that time. And I think it was brilliant the way he got what he needed without, he's never going to have more negotiating power than this. And for him to come in here already with, we don't know what it is yet, but armed with something that says this facility is going to get built. All right, well, now he's one step ahead of the game, right? Already, before he gets on campus, at least he knows this is going to happen. And I gotta give him a lot of credit, because he's already 1-0, to coin Kyle Flood's favorite phrase, with the way he handled this thing.
So Steve, let me piggyback off that. There are people who believe that what Greg Schiano did, by reportedly withdrawing, pulling out, that was a power play on his part. Do you buy that? Do you buy that? That this was a deliberate move for him it was a power play at that point?
I'm gonna say it's 30% possible, but 70% likely not. And I think he was just very frustrated. That's the sense I get talking to people who know him, that he believed he came to the table with reasonable demands, and that he wasn't sure who he was negotiating with, that things changed behind the scene, and then certainly, of course, the way it happened after he pulled out. I mean, everyone around him thought he was absolutely, just done with the place based on what, the way people, the way he was ripped behind the back, and just that stadium story and several other things. So, I don't know. I understand people who have that theory that he did this, he orchestrated this whole thing from the start. I just don't quite believe that that's the case. Yeah. All right. So now we're going into Board of Governors meeting tomorrow, press conference, we think maybe Wednesday. My question to you is this: we're going to finally have a chance to ask Schiano questions. I mean, he's not talked to the media since he left New England, essentially, other than a couple of questions at the New Jersey Hall of Fame ceremony when he inducted Jerry Eisenberg. So what do you want to hear from him? I mean, what do you think is the most pressing thing that we don't know? Sorry, you go first. Tell me what are you looking forward to getting an answer to?
I want to know what's his plan. What exactly is his plan to rebuild this the second time around? Because and we've talked about this before. In so many ways, it's as difficult, or if not even more difficult, of a challenge to rebuild it than the one that he inherited. And it took about 5 years, 4 or 5 years, to really get that program on the right track. So, what's his plan to do it now? People who have spoken with him in the last couple of weeks believe that he's going to hit the transfer portal hard, and he's going to try to flip the roster. How long can can that happen? Is this a program that can go maybe 4-8 next year, and then maybe contend for a bowl in year 2? I want to know what the plan of action is.
Yeah, sorry, that's interesting. So, because last time he did this, the rebuild, there were no shortcuts, and he made a point of that. He was going to build the foundation, was going to be solid, that whole thing. Transfer portal is different, though, right? I mean, that is a different way of approaching it than picking up a couple, people here and there and building with freshmen.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, I think now more than ever. I mean, there's so many guys on the Rutgers team alone right now. There are about 12 guys in it. From talking to various sources, I believe he's going to try to convince Art Sikowski to stay, as well as Raheem Blackshear, two of the more pivotal offensive players on the team. I think he's going to try to get another grad transfer quarterback. I think he's going to try to bolster that position as much as possible. It'll be interesting to see exactly what scheme he runs, and maybe Crash can speak to that. Maybe a little bit more later as far as coaching staff, but as I think he's going to try to get as many guys who can compete right away as possible.
Cratch, what's your first question?
My first question for him, well, I have two of them. My first question is, what does he think of what's happened this last week? Yeah. What does he have to say to the fans who rose up for him? And, frankly, he's never discussed Tennessee. I'm sure he doesn't really want to discuss it, but, he's been through this. What does it feel like for him after that happened, for it to go the complete opposite way? And for this to work, for these fans to stand up. I mean, what did that mean to him personally, professionally? And the other thing I have for question is, when he came here the first time, 19 years ago, he talked about winning a national championship and he got everybody fired up. Is he going to stand up there Wednesday, we think it is, and say I'm coming back because we need to win a national title? Is he going to put the Big Ten title, the Rose Bowl, the national title, is he going to put that on the table, or is he going to kind of have modest expectations? Because I know Scott Goodale, when he kind of did the same thing when he got the job, he started talking win national championships and winning a team title. And I think there were some points during the process where he kind of regretted, making those big proclamations early on. Now, obviously, it's happened now, so he paid off. But I'm intrigued. What is Greg's vision for Rutgers football 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Is it to win a national title? Is it to go to the playoff? Or is he just going to keep it as simple as we're just going to get better every day?
That's a really good one. It'd be fascinating to see if he does that, because people really did laugh at him when he said national championship in 2001. I'm sorry. So it'll be quite a shift if he does it again. I think my first question, I got two, but I have got a very specific one. I want to know what kind of offense he's going to run. I mean, that's obviously it's out there. We think it's a spread, but he didn't run it last time he was here. Who's his coordinator going to be? I mean, that to me is the biggest short-term thing that will impact the direction of this program. The biggest long-term thing is I want to know whose boss is going to be. And I don't know if that's a question you're going to be able to ask. I'm just kind of fascinated by the dynamic now. If it's really going to be Pat Hobbs, and look, we can discuss it, but he screwed this up 7 ways to Sunday. There's no possible way that you can sugarcoat what happened here. He fired Chris Ash too soon. He didn't anticipate kids going to the transfer portal. He fired John McNulty when he shouldn't have. I mean, just he waited too long to start the search. He didn't have Greg on his candidates. He underestimated the reaction to Greg Schiano. The whole thing to the very end. The fact he's still here to me is the typical Rutgers part of this, and I'm just curious to see how that dynamic's going to work. Is he going to go up there and try to say, this was our guy all along? I mean, his statement, what was it, Craig's path to greatness? What did he say exactly?
Rutgers football's on the path to greatness.
On the path to greatness. I mean, I'm just curious how long he's going to be the athletic director, what Greg is going to say publicly. Is he going to throw him a lifeline? Is he going to be tepid in his support? I mean, Sarge, just playing off that, what do you think is going to happen here behind the scenes? How long is Hobbs going to be in this job? Is there a path where he is standing there and the Monmouth game, season opener, still the athletic director?
Okay, a few things about that. And I'll be perfectly honest. And I'm sure, Steve, because you work the phones, and Kratz, you work the phones as well. There are a lot of big money people who have lost confidence in Pat Hobbs. And that's just I'm just being as honest as possible. That is just from the last couple of weeks of the search. There are people who have lost confidence in him. I think that might be even an understatement. Yeah. That being said, there was a time not so long ago where Pat Hobbs was the most popular person on campus, and had probably as much respect as any AD that's ever been at Rutgers for the fundraising that he did, being able to change the narrative from the Julie Herman debacle. So which Pat Hobbs is he? Is he the guy who like you said, bungled the search 7 different ways? The one who's lost confidence in a large segment of the big money people, or is he the guy who raised $100 million in a very short period of time, built buildings, in an unprecedented fashion at Rutgers? We've talked about this before. You wrote a column not so long ago where you could see, having known both Greg Schiano and Pat Hobbs, that they could work very well together, because Greg Schiano, his first time around, one of his biggest challenges was whenever he asked for something, the first answer was no. Whereas Pat Hobbs, in his 3 years, 4 years as the AD, is able to get yeses more often than not. So
you would agree that the 2 months of the past have made that hard to believe
100%, 100%. And there's a lot, it's going to probably more than anything going to be a matter of checking egos at the door and doing what's best at Rutgers. I think knowing the two of them, I think they're going to try to make it work, whether it can, because again, it's an ego-driven business. Whether they can make it work, time will tell. But I think they're going to try to make it work for the best of Rutgers.
Kratch, do you agree? I mean, we're going to have a new president here, another thing to the dynamic, add to the dynamic. I think a lot of people looking at that as the moment where there's a new athletic director too. What do you think?
I think that I've heard from people that Greg is, receptive, open to working with Pat, which I think is a good step given even everything that's going on here. But the one thing I'll say is that Greg is like most, when Chris Ash needed something, he had to call his athletic director. Greg can call the governor of New Jersey.
Yeah, now. I know.
He can, or the former governor, or this guy, or that guy. So I almost wonder if as long as the two of them can kind of work together in good faith, I tend to think that if Greg wants something, he's gonna be able to have people say yes to him, and it's almost gonna be a situation where. I don't think it's going to be Greg says, I need this, and Pat has to find a way to make it happen. I think it's almost going to be like Greg tells Pat, hey, we need to do this, and this person is going to make it, whether it's a booster, a donor, Mark Angelson, Greg Brown, Phil Murphy, someone like that's what I think. I think Greg is almost at the point now where he's not really reliant on Pat, as a football coach, AD, and I think Pat can also basically know that if he wants to focus on other things, that Greg is going to handle the football just fine.
All right, let's dive into true or false. I got some good ones for you this week. You know how it works. True or false? Greg Schiano will get this team back to a bowl next season. Kratch, true or false?
False.
Sarge?
False.
Greg Schiano will get this team back to a bowl in 2021. Kratch, true or false?
I'm going to say false.
Sarge?
True.
True, okay. Greg Schiano will get this team back to a bowl in 2022. That would be for you, Kratch, seeing where your level is here. True or false?
True.
You think 3 years? All right. Yeah. I think 3 is the optimistic one. I think 2 is probably too soon. True or false? Art Sikowski is going to stick around. Kratch?
I will say true at this point.
Sarge?
True.
True or false? Raheem Blackshear is going to stick around. Kratch?
I'll say false.
Sarge?
False.
True or false? Nunzio Campanile is going to be on the staff next season. Kratch?
I'm going to say false.
Wow. Sarge?
False.
All right, we'll get back to that one in a minute. True or false? The 2019 Rutgers season will be remembered as one of the Big Ten's worst teams. True or false? Kratch?
True.
Sarge?
True, and I don't want to in any way put it all on the players, because they dealt with an unprecedented amount of adversity. We use that term all the time as far as adversity, but from the hand that they were dealt with, true. The results, true, but I want to stop short of blaming on the players.
True or false? The Penn State effort is proof that this program isn't as far away as we might have thought. Kratch, true or false?
I will say true, but we'll caveat. We'll get back to.
Okay.
Oof. I mean, you were in the press box talking about the quarterback situation 2 years in a row. Penn State was
yeah, that's what I might say.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough one. False.
True or false? This whole episode with Schiano is a lot like what happened in Tennessee, except people in Tennessee are backwards, angry, and evil. True or false, Cratch?
I mean, I just like to kind of be, gracious with them because they live in Knoxville.
All right, Sarge. This is an inside joke, folks. My wife is from Tennessee. That's why I'm doing this. And her parents were up here for Thanksgiving weekend. And so this is kind of an inside joke that she will not hear because, of course, she does not listen to the podcast.
Yeah, it depends on what part of Tennessee, because I love Nashville.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite.
Yeah, that's not that part. There's a lot there's a lot of other things in Tennessee, in Nashville, including Clay Travis. All right, we'll skip that one. True or false? Listening to Cratch on a road trip is a splendid idea. Sarge, is that true or false?
Ooh, can I go no comment on that one?
Well, I don't know what happened. I didn't make it
in between. No, it was fine.
I just heard there was you got Brian Fonseca in the back seat, and he really starved to death. He was texting me like, "Please send help. I haven't eaten in days. I don't know what."
And I will pin a little bit of that on Cratch because we left around 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. It's normally about a 3.5 hour drive, and we're probably about an hour away from Penn State. And at that point, we're like, let's go have some breakfast. So we're looking for the next rest stop, and the next rest stop had a McDonald's and Arby's, a Burger King, and Cratch pulls off, and the McDonald's is under renovation. But then Cratch, I'm like, well, let's go to the Burger King, and Cratch is like, no, we could, Burger King. I mean, wow. It was as if, he was dead set against Burger King. He's like, we could do better. Let's hop back on the interstate, folks. It was probably another 30 miles before there was any food. I don't know what people do to eat in central Pennsylvania. I have no idea. But in that span of time, we lost Fonseca.
It's a shame. He's a nice kid. I liked him a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, but malnutrition is a real thing, and it's tough. And Cratch, has a little bit of blood on his hands for that. We did find a diner.
Twilight Diner.
Twilight Diner. It was
Loganton, Pennsylvania.
Loganton.
Yep.
Yep. Looks sounds great. All right, I missed all this. That's not.
Yeah, no, the Twilight Diner was good, but unfortunately we lost Fonseca.
That's a shame. Well, anyway. All right. What do you want to address here? We want to address the bowl. Sarge, you really think 2 years for bowl?
I do. Because I think two things. I think one, we talked about Penn State, that effort, and I think that might be overly simplistic to say that effort shows that they're not that far away, because I think Penn State end of the season quarterback issues. Penn State has so much more talent than Rutgers, but the rest of the Big Ten, and we've talked about this before. There are wins available, whether it's Maryland, Illinois, right? In crossover, Indiana. There are going to be wins available. The Big Ten, just outside of Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan, maybe Wisconsin on the other side. There are winnable games. They've played competitively against Iowa in the not so distant past. I mean, there are going to be wins available. The whole notion that the Big Ten is this juggernaut beast that is untamable probably isn't true. I think he's going to try to flip the roster and get talented players in a hurry, and I think that's going to be the reason why I think they could go 6-6.
I will say that
I just pulled up.
I'm looking at the same thing you are, Cratch. Go ahead. If you're thinking the schedule, right?
No, I pulled up the 2021 schedule. So they play Temple at home, at Syracuse, home against Delaware. Okay, let's see them 3-0. All right, you're going to Michigan. You're going to lose there, but you got an open date. Then you get Maryland at home. That could be 4 wins. At Illinois, at Indiana, maybe you get one of those. That's 5. At Northwestern, Michigan State at home. I could see them getting there. They would have to probably win at least 2 out of 3 of the road games against Northwestern, Illinois, and Indiana. And you probably have to beat Syracuse on the road. So it's not, like snap your fingers and it's going to happen. But I could see it happening. I just think 2022, let me put it this way. I bet you they're in bowl contention in 2021. Maybe they go 5-7, 4-8, couple of close losses. But then again, in 2022, you start the year at BC, at Temple, at Ohio. So I don't know. Yeah, I think I'll say 2022, but honestly, looking at it, the 2021 schedule might be a little bit more favorable.
Yeah, it's a shame because they're obviously still going to be, I think, talent-wise, a couple of recruiting classes away from that point. All right, and remember, this is a team that lost combined 355 to 51 in Big Ten play. Just keep that in mind.
Yes, that is true.
All right, Rutgers Insider questions. I got to tell you, people, I felt like it was really like a therapy session with the Rutgers Insider. We added so many new subscribers. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it's actually pretty gratifying because people seem to really like it. And the more people who come aboard, it's clearly happening by word of mouth, NJ.com/text. So we appreciate all of you. And each week we're going to let you give us some questions. First one from a friend of the podcast, Ayaz. How quickly do they put the staff together? I mean, how long is this process going to take to add staff? And will there be any former players on the staff, do you think, Cratch? Go ahead.
Great question. I think it might take a little while. I was speaking to someone who could be a candidate on the staff, and they said that their dealings with Greg in the past have been that Greg doesn't really, I guess, when Greg, obviously the Tennessee thing fell through, or when Greg went to the Bucs or anything, Greg is the type of guy who he usually doesn't start making phone calls to people he wants to hire until he is locked in. So the impression I got was that while Greg might have ideas and Greg might have felt people out, he's not going to necessarily be on the phone with assistant coaches saying, hey, I want you to come work for me until the BOG locks that in Tuesday morning at 10.
All right, another staff question. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I don't think it's going to be full of former players. I think if you're looking for a former player, I would say Scott Vallone, defensive line coach at Fordham, and Tequan Underwood, who was a wide receivers coach at Lafayette. He's now, I think, an offensive assistant for the Miami Dolphins. Those are the two guys that jump out as guys who, have coached in college, are well on their way in their coaching careers. What is the other staff question you had?
This is from another question to me. Greg Schiano needs to get Fran Brown or Anthony Campanile for defensive coordinator recruiting and then snag a top OC. Do you think those options are possible? What are you hearing?
I think Fran Brown is a guy who I've heard, not going to come out and say hard definitively, but I think Fran Brown's in the mix. I think Anthony Campanile in the mix. My personal lean at this point is that it wouldn't shock me if there's no Campanile on the staff.
You should ask that about the true or false. You said no to that. I'm a little surprised by that. Why?
Yes. I just think it's a situation where I think it's a couple of things. I mean, I think one, a lot of times the interim coach doesn't get retained.
Right.
Or if the interim coach gets retained, he's there for a year, and then he the new coach does that guy a favor and keeps him employed for a year, and then he's got to go find something else. But I just also think if you're a guy like Nunzio, you're young, you're a lot of people respect the job you did. You just were a head coach in the Big Ten for 2/3 of a season, and you called plays for 2/3 of a season. You might be a guy who it's better for your career advancement to go out there and, get a job calling plays as a coordinator somewhere, or even be an FCS head coach. I mean, I think he has enough experience and kind of, name recognition that like an NEC job or even an Ivy League job, given, that Bergen Catholic was an excellent academic institution and Bosco before them, he might be a serious candidate for one of those jobs. So I just think that it might be better off for his career to go find a job, somewhere else. And I think that's a possibility. I also don't think it's a guarantee that Greg's going to necessarily want him on the staff or, have a role that fits him on staff. I mean, just because Greg says, hey, I want you to be the running backs coach doesn't mean that's something Nunzio wants to do after he basically ran the show for 2 months.
I totally agree.
That's the point. And I think with Anthony too, like Anthony wants to be a head coach. Well, Greg, I talked to someone who said, Greg's going to run the defense.
Yeah.
Like Chris Ash, it's Greg's defense. So do you want to be a defensive coordinator in title only, or do you want to be someplace where you can kind of have more hands-on experience and look for the next big thing?
All right, this one's for you, Sarge. Someone will ask, where is all the money coming to pay for Shannon's requirements? If this could be open for more big donors to pay for it? And along those lines, what do you think has been agreed in regards to the field house? And because so far it's been very vague, which is true. What do you got?
So I will tell you the story real quick. In that the guy who by all accounts was very pivotal in this deal was Greg Brown. He's the chairman. He's a board of governors member. He was the former chair of the board of governors. Now he's the chair of the athletics subcommittee. Greg Schiano was the one who brought him aboard back in the early 2000s. If you remember, if you see photos inside the Hale Center, I've seen them online of James Gandolfini, during the coin toss, at the Insight Bowl. Greg Brown is in that photo. That was right around the time when Greg Brown was brought aboard. That was Greg Schiano's doing. Greg Schiano has an incredible Rolodex of supporters, of big money people. Greg Schiano, when the stadium deal, when the renovation back in 2008, 2009 was coming together, and then the one thing, the element that they could not get done was a recruiting lounge. He was the one who convinced Greg Brown and another donor to kick in $5 million for it. I say all that because I fully expect Greg Schiano to work his magic. He's going to be a head coach. Back in the day, we've called him the CEO. He's going to be one part CEO, one part coach, one part fundraiser. I think he's going to work his Rolodex and try to raise an incredible amount of money because he knows it's going to all have to be raised privately.
Right. And then, so what facility? So, okay. Assuming he does that, what do you have any idea what the facility is going to look like? Is it the scaled back version or the real thing?
No, it's going to be the real thing. I was told by sources in the last 24 hours that, that they're, what I reported the other day about the $150 million in facilities upgrades and new facilities. That's still very much the target. And what that means is we're talking about a field house, we're talking about a football only facility, and we're talking about upgrades to SHI Stadium. And the field house, I mean, I think I reported the numbers. It might be the cheapest of all of it. The football building might be $85 million. The field house might be $45 million. And then the upgrades to SHI Stadium, which were fully detailed in that report, that outside report that Rutgers put out last January. Apparently, they're $20-25 million to start. They're going to want to put luxury suites where the current press box is. They're going to want to try to do that type of stuff to upgrade and try to make revenue, off luxury boxes and that sort of thing. But $150 million is the target, and it all has to be privately raised.
That's good. I'm going to those. I've added it up, and it's $1 billion. All right, that's going to be interesting. That's going to be fascinating because. As you know, this place is already stretched thin. They're borrowing against everything that for the Big Ten money coming forward. It's going to be, if he can pull this off, he is a Vince Lombardi of fundraising. All right, we've got about 40 questions about recruiting. We should have had Todrick on. I apologize. He just got to it late. He's a busy man. Okay, the recruiting class is now at 96. What is the realistic benchmark for where Schiano can get this class? And then also, what are the different the dates here as far as this? Do we know how many scholarships he's got left? Cratch, I know this is not necessarily your forte, but do you have any idea as to what he can do recruiting wise to sort of, improve a class that is there below UMass right now, which is not good?
Yeah. I think, around the start of the season, when Ash was still here, I think we were thinking they have about like a 15-man recruiting class, signing class in 2020. Obviously, you can sign 25. I would think with guys going in the portal and some guys, who we've learned, because you never know exactly who's got a scholarship. They don't really ever kind of publicize that. So I think we've had a couple, like for instance, a guy like Austin Rosa, who's going to be a grad transfer, probably go play, his final year of college football someplace else. He's a scholarship player, so that's a scholarship that's freed up that necessarily wasn't being counted back in the summer. So I would think now that the class is probably closer to being like 20 players. Mm-hmm. But I think the big issue that fans have to realize is that if Greg uses a lot of those scholarships for transfer portal guys, their recruiting class, which is just high school seniors, might still be pretty low nationally, and that might be fine with Greg for all we know.
Yeah, he's got to focus. He's got to focus on the juniors. He's got to look at 2021, I think, at this point too. And really, this is going to be, no matter what happens, it's not going to be a great class. I think we can all agree at that. Hey, you mentioned Chris Ash. I've got a Chris Ash question for you, Cratch. I heard a rumor that Chris Ash could be hired at Texas as the defensive coordinator. I didn't hear that rumor. That's fascinating. If he does, what does that mean for the Rutgers buyout?
So, yes, I mean, Texas, obviously Chris Ash and Tom Herman, the Texas coach, are very close friends from their time at Ohio State. I know they used to talk to each other pretty frequently, when Ash was the coach here. Texas fired, it kind of had their house cleaning Sunday. They fired the defensive coordinator, so I would think Chris Ash will be a candidate there. Obviously, Chris Ash went and visited Texas after he was fired by Rutgers to kind of consult and help them out as they prepared for Oklahoma. Somewhat related story. Drew Maringer got fired from Texas, and it seems like it was kind of an ugly firing. So, I don't know. Though, I'm not going to, give credence to all these, but these wild, message board rumors about Drew Maringer. It sounds like Drew Maringer was not a popular guy with the Longhorns coaching staff at the end. Okay. So, nothing confirmed or reported by the Austin American Statesman or anything, or the sites that cover Texas, but this seems like Drew Maringer got chased out of Austin yesterday. So if Texas were to hire Ash, obviously whatever he makes would offset what Rutgers owes him. But the one thing I will caution is that it's not like, on one hand, I think some people are like, well, is Texas going to give him like $50,000 and benefits, and Rutgers has to pay the rest? From what I've seen in the past, that doesn't really happen as much as you might think it would. It seems like most fired head coaches who get coordinator jobs, they get paid a pretty, reasonable salary. So I would think, if Chris Ash goes to Texas and gets paid $700,000, then I think next year he was due to make 2.4. So that would mean Rutgers only had to pay him 1.7 million. So yes, Rutgers should be able to save a good amount of coin if Ash gets a job, and I have no reason to think he won't get a job this coming season, whether it's in the NFL, Texas, or another college. But it's not like Texas is going to say, well, Chris, we'll give you $2 million to be our defensive coordinator, and suddenly Rutgers is completely off the hook. All
right, I got two more for you. We're already over 40 minutes. Great job by us talking as long as we could here. How long is Schiano here for? Come on, guys, he just got here. You want to know how long he's going to stay? Is this his final coaching stop, or can you envision him leaving Rutgers one day to pursue a bigger opportunity? I mean, my initial gut says he's 53. It's going to take him 3 years to turn this ship around. If he gets it back to 8-4, is he really going to jump to? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's possible. Sarge, what do you think? Is this it? Have we hit the end of the line for Greg Schiano, or is he still upwardly mobile?
I say this is it, and I've been surprised before because I think especially toward the end, he got a little he wanted to pursue the NFL, and but I think this is it. Keep in mind this is a guy who while he was at Rutgers, he turned down Michigan, he turned down Miami, two of the at the time premier college football programs in the country. One Rutgers booster said those actions always proved that there wasn't another college that he'd rather coach than Rutgers. The NFL he tried, didn't work, and I don't see him, getting a call on another NFL job ever again. So I think this is it. You're right. It would take him to 61. He'll probably get a new contract if he does have success. At some point. In year 4 probably. But I think by all accounts, this is going to be the destination job for him.
All right, and finally, will Rutgers compete for a natty in my lifetime? By the way, I'm 30 years old now. Well, 30 years old, you're probably gonna live another 50 years. There might not be football then. I mean, who the hell knows? There might not be a planet by the time you're dead if you're 30 years old. So yeah, that's a tough question. Is Rutgers ever going to compete for a national championship, Cratch? Ever's a long time.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about college football, and I feel like the playoff has kind of distorted the view for a lot of younger fans. And I'm 32, so I'm not trying to talk down to the kids here. There's only 8 teams every given year that can actually win a national title. And some years there's like 3 teams that can do it. College football was never supposed to be. There was a reason why for 100 years we just made up the national champion on paper at the end of the year. This has always been a sport that's been about winning your rivalry games, winning your conference, trying to get to the best bowl game you can as a reward. This has never been a sport driven by the national title. That's always been something that I understand it's become prominent now because people want it played on the field, and that's fine. But if you're Rutgers, you should not wake up every day. I understand why Greg Schiano said it 19 years ago. He might say it again this week. National championship is not what should drive Rutgers football. What should drive Rutgers football, so I know people have kind of mocked him for it recently, and I think they're wrong. Pat Hobbs was right to say, I want to go to the Rose Bowl. You're in the Big Ten. If you're a member of the Big Ten, your goal should be the Rose Bowl because that means you won the conference and you're going to the most, storied, prestigious event in the sport.
Wait.
So that's what should drive Rutgers.
Hang on, I'm getting a call, Cratch. It's from Pat. He wants to know if you're available to be hired. He wants to hire you as his PR person. Interesting. I don't know how he heard this. He's listening as we're talking. That's amazing.
Cratch, as your agent, I would advise you to bilk Rutgers for as much. They apparently have a lot of food.
Put your card in the Rutgers ATM and take as much cash as you can.
7 figures, Cratch. 7 figures.
All right. That was great. Thank you for your questions. You had like 90 of them. I couldn't get to them all. I apologize for that. Let's talk anything else, hoops, any wrestling updates. What do we got before we sign off?
First wrestling, first Big Ten dual meet of the season, Saturday, 7 p.m. at the Rack. They're going to wrestle Maryland. They should roll Maryland. Maryland's probably is the weakest program in the Big Ten. I think hoops is at Pitt on tomorrow night, Tuesday night, so that's going to be a test for them. Women's basketball won their tournament, Thanksgiving weekend tournament down in the Bahamas, so they're on a roll. I actually have a women's basketball AP Top 25 vote. I have the Scarlet Knights in there at the bottom. I think, like 22, 23. And, Seton Hall game in a couple of weeks. That's good. That's what I'm really interested to see because, Steve Peichel, went out there and passionately defended Pat Hobbs when this is all kind of falling apart. And honestly, I was a little surprised that some fans were kind of, we're not happy with that. So this is a big stretch here with Pitt, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Wisconsin here, Michigan State on the road. I think I flipped windows. I think Michigan State's, it's at Pitt, at Michigan State, home against Wisconsin, home against Seton Hall. My understanding is that they're already kind of talking about, sell out for Seton Hall. I could see Greg being at that game with recruits and then taking the mic at halftime and addressing the crowd. So I think this is a big kind of 4-game stretch for Steve Peichel and for Rutgers men's basketball. We're going to get a really good idea of where this season is going as these next 4 games unfold.
All right, Sarge, final thought. Have it. What do you got?
I guess
You're fried.
I haven't covered this for 20 years. No, I haven't covered this for 20 years. I will say this. I remember that night, and you were there too at Rutgers back in January of 2012. And we both went on, to Tampa the next day. But that night around 8:30, when he went into that little media trailer and addressed this, I thought that was going to be the last time he'd ever set foot in Piscataway, as Rutgers coach. I know his name was mentioned, at various points, for the vacancy, even in 2016. I never saw it. I never thought he was coming back. And, until obviously in the last couple of months when everyone thought that he was the ideal candidate. But I still am, truthfully, having covered this for a long time and just remembering the way he left. And I'm still a little bit in disbelief.
Funny story about that, because we were on different teams back then. And I decided, because we had Lucci, he was in the room writing, like, all right, I'm going to stake him out, because if he comes out that door and tries to get into his car and leave, I'm gonna get the quote so I'm gonna beat Sarge to the story. So I'm in the car, the door opens, he comes, striding out like Greg does, and like head down, walking quickly. So I of course I drop my computer, try to get out of the car, and I realize no, he's not walking to his car, he's walking straight at me. And of course, because it's Greg, I'm just convinced he's gonna yell at me or something. Even back then, you're like, oh no, here he comes. So then he walks past me, he walks right into the press room, gives a statement. And I'll never forget this. This is Greg Schiano in a nutshell. He comes out at the end of it. I'm walking with him to see, to get a scene, try to write the column about what happened. He bends over picks up a piece of litter on the ground outside the health center and puts it in his pocket. And it just struck me like that's Greg. Like even at the end, like he's leaving this thing, he's going to the NFL. The next day, he's still picking up garbage outside the health center because he is that attention to detail. So there's a little story to end on. Guys, this has been a wild week. I appreciate all your help to get through this. I appreciate all the listeners, all the texters, everybody. We'll be at the press conference, and we're going to have another podcast to break it down. Maybe we'll even do an emergency one later in the week if we have the time and resources to get it done. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.